السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألف لام ميم ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين الذين يؤمنون بالغيب ويقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم ينفقون. We always refer to this verse of the Quran, which is in Surah Al-Baqarah, to remind ourselves that the guidance comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and those who are conscious of the presence of God and existence of God are the ones who benefit from it and are the ones who believe in things that are beyond human comprehension, who establish prayers and who spend from their resources. My name is Aslam Abdullah and I am associated with IslamiCity. And this series that we are conducting comprises scholars, activists, experts, laypersons, and people who are the students of the Quran. And the idea is that each one of us has stake in our religion and in our book, and each one of us should make an effort and attempt to understand, and those understandings should be shared among each one of us so that we could benefit from each other's intellect and each other's perceptions. Today we have with us Aiman Pervaiz, a computer scientist who is located now in Canada. Originally he comes from India. He studied at USC, so he has the experience of India, United States, and now in Canada. And he has been studying the Quran with his father, Dr. Aslam Pervaiz, who we had heard in the past, and who have developed his own understanding of the message of the Quran and the relevance of the Quranic message in our times today. We are excited to have him with us. Please proceed, Aiman, with your reflection on the Quranic message.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Aiman Pervaiz and the topic for today's discussion is Ayat 116, Surah 6. Having majority is not a criterion of truth. So if majority is not a criterion of truth, what is? Let's see what Quran says about the criterion and also take a look at the approach which Quran defines to find the truth. If you look at Quran's approach in general, it is to reflect, reason, contemplate, seek answers. 24/44. It is God who causes night and day to alternate. In this too, behold, there is surely a lesson for all who have eyes to see. 2/242. In this way, God makes clear unto you his messages, so that you might learn to use your reason. 8/22. Verily, the vilest of all creatures in the sight of God are those deaf, those dumb ones who do not use their reason. As we see in these ayats, Quran lays a lot of emphasis on reasoning, on reflection, on finding answers. In these ayats, Quran or God is expecting us to study nature and understand it. We are supposed to extend this approach, same approach, into our internal lives, into our daily lives or human affairs. And this approach which is based on reasoning, reflection, and understanding, and then acting is the approach which Quran teaches us in order to seek the truth. When we adopt this approach of Quran, we find that majority or the popular opinion might not be in sync with Quran. Then in this situation, as Muslims, what are we supposed to do? Should we just get carried away and start doing what the majority is doing? Or should we strive in the path of God, strive in the path of Deen, and stand up to the peer pressure and do the right thing, do what Quran says and act according to it? 29/69. But as for those who strive hard in our cause, we shall most certainly guide them onto paths that lead unto us. For behold, God is indeed with the doers of good. So this ayat clearly tells us that the right path or the way the Muslims should behave is irrespective of what majority is doing. We should stick with what Quran says. And when we do so, we strive in the path of God. And out here, God says that if you do so, you're not left alone. God will support us. God is indeed with the doers of good. In order to strive in the path of Deen, in order to stand up to something, in order to understand what we should be standing up for, we need to know what's in the Quran, what's written in Quran in the first place. 28/85, verily, he who ordained the Quran for thee will bring thee back to the place of return. The reason why I included this ayat is because, brothers and sisters, Quran is ordained on us. That's what this ayat is telling us. Verily, he who ordained the Quran for thee. It's not optional. It's something which is mandatory. And if we don't know what is in the Quran, we won't be able to decide if what we are about to do or what's going on or what the majority is doing, whether it's right or wrong. And if you don't know what is written in Quran, what God is asking us to do, and we end up following anybody else, it can be the majority opinion, minority opinion, doesn't matter. If we end up following society, for instance, then we are shying away and not following the directives of God who sent the Quran. Rather, we are following either our desires or our society. And that is not the definition of the truth given by Quran. Usually, we think that ignorance is bliss and we can get out of this situation saying that, hey, I didn't know that Quran says so. But this won't come to our rescue on the day of judgment. We can't say to God that I didn't know Quran said so and so. I didn't know any better. God expects us to know better. God has ordained Quran. God wants us to make an effort to understand Quran, to live by it. And all our actions done in ignorance or deliberately, which are not in sync with Quran's directives, we will be held accountable for those. And we will face the consequences, be it in this life or in the life hereafter, of going against the Quran. 28/50. And who could be more astray than he who follows but his own likes and dislikes without any guidance from God? This ayat here tells us very clearly that if we don't follow Quran and we end up following whatever else, we are not on the right path. And that is not the guidance of God. When we read Quran, we learn Quran's approach and we adopt it in our daily lives, which is to think and then act. We equip ourselves to take an informed decision about right and wrong. We gain insight and strength to adjudge with all righteousness which way to go. With this bent of mind, when we start looking around us, like what's going on, what the majority is doing, we find that it is mainly monkey see, monkey do. There is no logic to it. And it's not just with the social phenomena or the trends which are going around. This can be something like a tradition which has been handed down over generations into a family. Quran, on the other hand, teaches us not to follow anything blindly. It expects us to reflect, to reason, to question, to find answers, and then get convinced and then act or mend our ways. 5/104. For when they are told, come unto that which God has bestowed from on high and unto the apostle, they answer, enough for us is that which we found our forefathers believing in and doing. And look at God's response here. Why? Even though their forefathers knew nothing and were devoid of all guidance? So God is saying that you want to follow your forefathers, but look at the criteria here. The criteria, which is the acceptable criteria in the eyes of God, is not because our forefathers have been doing it, hence I'll do it, or like everybody does it, hence I'll do it. In the eyes of God, the criteria is knowledge and divine guidance. God here is saying that you are trying to follow something which your forefathers were doing without understanding if it is in accordance to our guidance. So as we see here, the criteria of truth is not the majority. The criteria is knowledge under the light of divine guidance. 17/36. Do not follow blindly what you do not know to be true. Ears, eyes, and heart. You will be questioned about all these. This ayat kind of builds upon what I discussed, my interpretation, my understanding of the previous ayat. God here again in the Quran says that whenever you find yourself in a situation where when you ask why, the response you get is that's how it's done. In those situations, you should use your ears, eyes, and heart. That is, you should gather information. You should learn more about it. Use your ears and eyes to learn about that tradition or that phenomena or that opinion. And then compare it and then evaluate it against what Quran has to say. And if you are convinced in your heart after that, then sure, either follow it or mend your ways and change your ways to do something which is more in sync with Quran. This is the last slide I have in today's discussion, and I want to start it with a quote from Winston Churchill. The truth is inconvertible. Malice may attack it, ignorance may deride it, but in the end, there it is. We have been sent down to earth to live our lives according to Quran, which is the ultimate truth. When we do so, we grow as humans, we grow as Muslims, and we qualify ourselves for Jannah. We have a pleasant life here as well as hereafter. The definition of right and wrong, success and failure for a Muslim should be defined through Quran's permanent values and not by social values. These definitions may vary from society to society, from time to time. Something which was considered good or successful in our forefathers' time might not be the case now. Society and its values, they change with time, but that's not the case with Quran. And Allah himself has promised to protect these permanent values of Quran. So we are supposed to live by this Quran. We are supposed to define success, failure, right and wrong according to the Quran. And we need to take these teachings of Quran and apply them into our lives willingly. When we do so, as I said, the whole point of being sent to earth was to grow, to be better Muslims. When we do this, when we abide by Quran, we start walking on that path and we strive in the path of Deen. Surah Baqarah, ayat 120. Say, behold, God's guidance is the only true guidance. The reason why I included this ayat is, and as you can see, I have the word only in caps. The reason here is that God is very clear that the only code of conduct which is acceptable in his eyes is the one which has been sent to us in Quran. Irrespective what else we do, it might be good or might be bad according to the social definitions. But if it is not congruent to the teachings of Quran, then it's not acceptable in the eyes of God. With that, I would like to conclude this. Thanks a lot. Assalamu alaikum.
That was Aiman Pervaiz giving his perspective on a very important issue, is how to determine the truth, and can majority define the truth and dictate its truth. Let us bring Brother Abdul Alim, Muhammad Alim, to the show, and he would be, getting the conversation further on this particular issue with me. Hopefully, we would be able to, do justice with Evan's presentation by reflecting on what he was telling us. Brother
Assalamu
Ali.
alaikum, Dr. Aslam. Thank you so much. I really enjoy listening to Aiman, especially the way he presents his case. he's a programmer, and a computer scientist. So he presents it in a very logical, methodological way, basically. So the aspect of the majority is not a criterion of truth. While he was doing this presentation, I was thinking of there's a lot of study now these days on there's a herd mentality. People, without reflecting on anything, just follow whatever the majority is saying. And there's lots of studies that are being done on herd mentality or group thinking, even in organizations where people start with a certain idea. One person starts with a certain idea, and then all of a sudden the group starts talking about the same thing. So it's group thinking that they're talking about, and that happens when people are not reflecting properly. So I was going to ask you, could we understand this in that perspective also, in terms of this new studies that are being presented in group thinking and herd mentality?
I think we need to look at the issue from the perspective is that whose interests are at stake. And in that particular respect, the divine guidance, because we believe that what God has given us is a divine guidance, or is the divine guidance. It tells us وَإِمَّا مَا يَنْفَعُ النَّاسَ فَيَمْكُثُ فِي الْأَرْضِ, that whatever benefits humanity is what stays forever. So the emphasis here is on the benefit of humanity. Who would determine what the benefits of humanity is? A geographical group, a racial group, an ethnic group, or an ideological group. And we have seen that whenever ethnic, cultural, linguistic, racial groups decide, or even political groups want to decide and determine the benefit of people, they always keep the interests of their supporters in front of them. That, of course, creates inequality. That, in fact, does not serve the purpose that all humans are equal. It does not give that kind of impression that all humans deserves the similar kind of chances in life. In that particular respect, Quran always says that there should be amongst you a group of people who selflessly and sincerely try to determine what is beneficial for humanity, not for one nation, not for one group. Do we have that group? That group can emerge only on the basis of certain ideological principles. But unfortunately, the religion or God's guidance has been presented in such a manner to the majority that they look more like a ritual rather than a way of life, rather than something that is beneficial for all. And unless you change that perception of religion, unless you change that perception of divine guidance, that divine guidance has meaning for the people in this life as well as in the life hereafter, and the interests of all will be secured under the divine guidance, we would always have what you are calling about this herd kind of mentality, or this group mentality, where people who have power, people who can manipulate media, people who can manipulate public opinion can determine. And we see in the case of this pandemic, this kind of situation, initial stages, no one was willing to accept that. And the president of this country was calling it a hoax. The party that was controlling the Senate was calling it a hoax. Still many of them do. But then the experts came forward, they gave their perspective, they gave their perception, they fought tooth and nail against all those kind of things, and then ultimately it is they who prevailed in terms of saving at least this country from this disaster that you are seeing in different parts of the world. The same thing happened in India when they let the guards down, when they said that it cannot be, it is not a real kind of issue. We can beat it by clapping our hands or clapping the metal plates. They came up with all those kind of ideas. So important thing is that what is in the best interest of humanity. Now, Quran says that there should be amongst you, means among the human beings, a group that sincerely is devoted to the facts and realities and truth and the guidance of God. And that group can emerge only on the basis of certain ideological premises. It cannot emerge on the basis of ethnicity. It seems that we are moving towards that direction where people would ultimately, based on the communication channels that we have opened, based on the interactions that the world is having, based on the nature of the problems that we are having, that we have to think in those kind of terms where the reality, the guidance of God would prevail to preserve human interests.
So, of course, when we're talking about arriving at the truth, there's an aspect of reflection going on and critical thinking. Isn't that what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking us to do in terms of not just follow what everyone else is following, but reflect yourself,
Indeed.
and do some critical thinking on your own, and try and contemplate with sincerity, what you're trying to think about.
Indeed, I mean, you rightly pointed out. I mean, there are two ways to acquire knowledge of the truth. One is through trial and error method. And that trial and error method is a continuous process. We would continue to basically go back to our own premises, question them, challenge them, and then reach to certain conclusions. But there are certain areas of knowledge that are revealed, that are constantly telling human beings to focus on those things if they want to lead a life based on prosperity and peace and harmony. The revealed knowledge helps people to use their critical understanding and critical thinking to reach to the conclusions that divine has determined for humanity. For instance, the Quran says, "Faslahu zata bainakum," that mend your relationship among yourself. Now, this is a revealed fact. And our experimentation and our empirical understanding clearly tells that when human beings resolve their conflicts, overcome the differences that exist among themselves, and go back to the drawing board to understand the differences and then to overcome them and to create a better understanding of each other and a better society, then everyone benefits. So you apply the critical thinking in matters that we have been doing but have not been able to basically come up with any solutions. Just take this ayah that I mentioned, first, if in the international diplomacy, and by the way, it took us nearly 5,000 years to create United Nations, even though it is not very effective, but to basically give this idea that let's come together and then discuss all those kind of matters that have set us apart. After we had killed 153 billion people in 2 world wars, we reached that kind of conclusion. It is that trial of error that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying people to critically examine and see that the one who created you is the one who has the best interest for you in his mind, and that would come when you critically examine yourself in the framework of what he has given. So the critical thinking is not done in abstract. It is done in relation to certain facts and certain realities. And Quran And in that respect, I would say the creator of the universe, because when I say the Quran, people would say, well, it's a Muslim's holy book, even though it is not Muslim's holy book. It is a book for all. So it is in that particular sense, I think we should look at it we should critically examine even those ideas and concepts that are presented in the Quran in a manner that would secure the interests of humanity. And when we are talking of humanity, we are not talking of the interest of one group of people and one set of linguistic, cultural, or what you call geographical group, but for humanity as a whole.
So when the Quran is talking about the truth, of course, as you said correctly, that we consider the Quran as the word of God. So it's talking about and God knows the absolute truth, but He still has given human beings the flexibility, the ability to come to our own conclusions. He's saying that this is the truth, but I want you to come to the truth on your own. And so it's a matter of understanding, first of all, the absolute truth and what is right and what is wrong also. And
First,
yes.
you're right. I think let's look at both in the physical world and the ethical world. What we are doing is we are discovering what is already there in the physical world. All the ingredients are there. We are developing an understanding of the properties of those ingredients. And we are developing an understanding of their combination and their impact on the world. So the potential is there, the energy is there, we are discovering. So the critical thinking is helping us to discover and rediscover and constantly keep on discovering what is already there. So it is not that we are inventing something, it is something we are discovering. Similarly, in the ethical fields, we are also using critical understanding to understand what is best in a given kind of situation for us. If the Quran is telling us that we should mend our relationship, Quran is telling us, then critical thinking would help us to see that how does it reflect in our personal relationship? How does it reflect in our communal relationship, social relationship, our relationship with the environment, all those things, And this is how we basically expand the level of understanding and using critical thinking. So he wants us to reach to those kind of conclusions. He wants us to reach those kind of conclusion, and based on what he has done, and then he says, "Fabi," one of the verses of the Quran says, "Fabi ayyi alai rabbikuma tukazziban." And which of the verses of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, signs of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, you would refute, you will deny? What is the context here? The context is that when you apply your mind and apply your reason, you will reach to the conclusions that through revelation are being made known to you in certain areas. In the physical world, you will keep on discovering, as the Quran says, that this universe will keep on revealing its secrets to human beings, and certainly until the truth become known to them, in the sense that a day will come when human beings will acquire that kind of knowledge where he will conquer this physical world and physical universe based on the guidance of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. So Islam is, Allah Subhanahu wa Taala is giving a grand picture and grand project to human beings, that apply your mind, because he knows that not everyone believes in what he's telling, that not everyone believes in existence. Not even Muslims believe in what Allah Subhanahu wa Taala is saying. We're talking about 7 billion people. How many Muslims would apply critical thinking? How many Muslims would apply that faslahu zada bainakum? The 46 conflicts that are taking place in the Muslim world among tribals and among the ethnic groups and among cultural groups and among even ideological groups, that if they could not even have this critical thinking be applied to this principle of the Quran, فَصْلَهُ ذَاتَ بَيْنَكُمْ, and they are Muslims, then then there are 7 people who refute the existence of God, or the existence of God as Muslims perceive. So it is in that particular context we have to see what is being said.
So I wanted to stretch this conversation from truth to actually understanding what is right and what is wrong also. So, and I often reflect on from the Sunnah, there's the incident that talks about when the Prophet ﷺ sent a group of people to a neighboring town and said, when you reach that town, pray Asr. And then when they set out on that journey, the time for Asr was declining, and half of them said that we are going to pray Asr now because the time is, we are out of time for Asr. And half the group said that we will still follow what the Prophet told us to do. Even if the time of Asr has gone, has left, we will still pray Asr when we get to that next town. And of course, you know the incident when they came back to the Prophet, they asked, who was right and who was wrong, and the Prophet said, both are right. So how can you reflect on that in terms of how we understand right and wrong?
I think most of the time we are in a position where we cannot clearly demarcate what is right and what is wrong, because both the options, depending on the intentions and depending on the circumstances, may be valid. Let me give you an example here that even though we are asked to pray 5 times a day on their allotted time. But for instance, if a doctor who in this pandemic is busy taking care of patients, and he knows that he would be in a surgery at the time when the Asr is taking place, and if out of that kind of concern that he might not pay full attention to the patient, he combines the prayer with Zohar, it would be right. But if he gets a break during the surgery and he offers prayer at that particular time, that would also be right. So we have situations. We have situations where people can perform things which could be right and could be, in the options, both the options could be right. What is it that would determine? And I think it is in that particular respect that is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's prophet is making it clear, that what would determine is your true and sincere understanding of the issue and the problem. One group of people were saying that we would follow what the prophet was telling us, and the other was saying that we would basically follow what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's guidance, as we understand, is. And in that particular respect, both were sincere in their efforts. And that is what basically was finalized, I think.
Yeah, so the aspect that I understand from that incident is that both groups did a sincere reflection and came to 2 different conclusions. But what mattered most was that they both put that effort in trying to understand, what they should be doing, and it was a sincere effort that they did.
Indeed, I think, and that is what the critical thinking is.
Yes, absolutely.
One group was critically thinking that, well, this is what our prophet told us, we should follow that. Another was saying, well, critical thinking that, there is a time for the prayer, and the Quran is very specific on that, we should follow that. Now, there is no conflict between these two. There's no conflict between these two situations. It is a matter of applying your own critical thinking to to serve the same cause, because both of them are doing the same cause. The principle, and that is the principle of praying, not the principle of praying at 501 or 507.
Right. So another thing that Aiman pointed out was these verses that talk about do not blindly follow the forefathers. And of course there was admonition in various incidences where the Quran is talking about, that people are just blindly following what their forefathers were doing, even during the time of the Prophet, where people didn't want to leave the religion of their forefathers. And in that context, I was being reminded by a saying of Dr. Irfan Khan, who you know very well, of course, who passed away a couple of years ago. He once said that arranged marriage is good, but a love marriage is better. And then he immediately followed that up with that this is the same relationship we should have with the Quran. So, yes, we are following our forefathers. We are following a pre-arranged relationship that we have with the Quran. But what does that mean to have that love relationship with the Quran? So would you reflect a little bit on that? Yeah.
It was definitely a very nice allegorical reference to our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and our relationship with the reality. What Quran is saying is a very powerful concept that the world has come to realize after its long search of 5,000 to 8,000 years of research and contemplation, that the human societies evolve, that our understanding of the realities evolve, that we are not stagnant. And when we are not stagnant, we have to basically go back to the origin and to understand that original message, original guidance within the context in which we are living. And basically have to move forward from that point of view. So the human journey is constantly evolving, constantly dynamic, constantly moving, because this is how the nature has set itself in a manner in which we see it every day. This is what we see with the growth of trees. This is what we see with the growth of expansion of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Quran is saying that your forefathers definitely have an understanding. But is that understanding relevant today? That is a question that you have to ask to yourself based on the changes that have taken place in the world. And this is basically how we should look into. If we find anything that is based on certain universal realities that are unchangeable, then what was said by the Aslaf or by the forefathers is relevant and makes sense. But what is not relevant should not make any kind of reference to what is happening today. And in that respect, unfortunately, we find that the Muslims have become more like muqallideen or salaf, means that we always would follow salaf. That this is what their understanding of modesty was. So we would follow that understanding of modesty. This is how basically we treated non-Muslims, and we basically would follow their understanding. This is not what the intention of the Quran. The Quran's intention basically comes again from few defining verses of the Quran. One I mentioned, and the other, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ, that we have given dignity to the children of Adam. How that dignity has to be preserved for each and every human being. This is the responsibility of those who believe in divine guidance. And people have their own understanding of dignity according to their ethnic and their cultural and geographical understanding of the reality. But as believers, divine guidance is the source for defining dignity. Now, for instance, in matter of slavery, no matter what you say, slavery was inhuman. Prophet prohibited it. Quran prohibited it. But it lasted until 1960 in the Muslim world. Where was the dignity of human being in that respect? It was not. So what is important for us is to focus on things that would take us closer to the divine guidance and divine message, rather than going back to Aslaf or going back to the forefathers. Yes, they made their contribution in their time, but the Quran itself tells us, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها لها ما كسبت وعليها ما اكتسبت, that everyone would carry one's own burden, everyone would get things according to their capacity. What they did in the past was their concern. What you would do would be your efforts. So the Quran is encouraging this. Quran is taking a stand against taqlid. Quran is taking a stand against the fixed opinions and blind following of Aslaf. And that is what dynamism is, that when we basically go back with open heart and clean heart to the Quran and seek guidance without any glasses, without any kind of contamination, we reach to a different conclusion. And we definitely basically becomes much more powerful and much more energetic in our quest to get closer to God Almighty.
Well, so this is a very fascinating discussion. Thank you so much for entertaining my reflections in this process. So,
well, thank you. I think these are the issues that we need to discuss openly, because after all, each one of us, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, alaykum anfusikum, that you are responsible for yourself. What does the responsibility mean if we keep on following others? Responsibility means that we exercise our intellect that God has given us to relate the reality to his guidance, and then reach to conclusions within the framework of serving humanity and within the framework of dignifying human beings. Because that is the way Allah would be dignified, and that is the way Allah would be served.
So I guess we could conclude this part of our discussion, and I'll hand it over to you to conclude then.
Thank you very much. And we had this kind of discussion in our textbooks, but I think in public we sometimes hesitate talking about these kind of issues, thinking that probably we might make Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala angry. In fact, if we do not discuss these issues, Allah would be angry, because He has given us the intellect. And this is what I think IslamiCity has opened a door. I'm not saying that this is the door of Ijtihad, but at least we have slightly cracked it open so that we could look with the curious eyes and looks on the other side of the door and realize what does it mean to have an intellect, and what does it mean to relate that intellect with the divine guidance. Thank you very much, and inshallah we will be with you tomorrow with Aiman once again, and we hope that the discussion that we are having makes some sense. With that, as-salam, have a wonderful night and have a wonderful suhoor tomorrow. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi